Boom. What's up, y'all? Welcome to Kiilz Corner. This is going to kind of be the first of many little monthly little Bay Area sports things that I'm going to be doing with my super buddy, my great friend, my guy, Drew. Today, for the inaugural little launch off, we're going to be talking about the Oakland A's and the current state of the team and kind of the big three main reasons why we think this Las Vegas debacle is going on. Just a real quick, for those who have absolutely no idea what's going on, just real quick, this is not the first time the A's have talked about relocating. They were originally in Philadelphia, then went to Kansas City, and ended up in Oakland. They won 5 World Series in Philadelphia, none in Kansas City, but in Oakland they did win 3 in a row, 72, 73, and 74, and of course, my favorite year in existence, 1989, when they swept the Giants in 4 games, in the middle of a big ass earthquake. In that time, in our lifetime, I will basically just say we're 40s. We're in our 40s, early 40s. We're strapping young men still. We have seen many different renderings of stadiums that were supposed to be in Oakland. We've heard of a possible move to Fremont. We've heard of a move to San Jose. There was supposed to be a stadium built at Laney College. There's Howard Terminal. We've seen all sorts of mannerisms of reasons why we can't get things done. Meanwhile, watching a team play in a crumbling stadium with an ownership group that got popular during a Moneyball era, but is now just turned into something that's just absolutely awful and atrocious, unfair to fans, and unfair to just baseball in general. Quick shout out to the Oakland 68s and the Last Dive Bar merch group for setting up what has now become the reverse boycott game, and those sell shirts that you've been seeing popularized all throughout baseball. Kind of, now we're seeing them pop up not only in Oakland but all over MLB stadiums. And as we speak right now, there's the Battle of the Bay series going on in Oakland between the A's and the Giants. And and A's fans have been throwing all sorts of sell the team chants and stay in Oakland just to make sure that their voices are heard. That's pretty much where we are right now. I am going to turn to Drew real quick and just go, hey, Drew, what the hell is going on with this team, my guy?
Well, first off, we need to mention that you and I were at the game yesterday.
Sure were.
We were at the A's versus Giants yesterday, August 5th. And it was actually my son's first baseball game, period. First baseball game ever. And I love what's going on with the whole Summer of Sell. I think it is fantastic that there's an actual name to it and that there's an actual movement. Like, nothing is crazier than watching ESPN where they actually will talk about the Summer of Sell, like when they were doing the Sell the Team stance in LA a few days ago when they were playing the Dodgers. So that's awesome. And it was awesome yesterday. Like, we're almost in a full house. There's 37,000 people there. And even like Seth Brown, who got the winning hit, what he said is when there's the team fuels off of that much fans. Like, if you actually
how can you not, right?
Yeah, if you look at look at their wins, like most of their wins in Oakland this year have been when they've actually had fans there. It's
they won the reverse boycott game. That was 37,000 people then. They won their opening night game. That was like 1,000 people there. So yeah, it just fuels the term like home field advantage, right?
But once again, though, like, one of the things now, as you know, but I'll tell everyone, my wife is actually a Giants fan. And
no one's perfect. Drew.
No one's and we've actually been to a couple of Giants games in their stadium. And like yesterday, because I think the last time that I went to a game before yesterday was when me and you went to see the A's versus Orioles, and Machado was still on the Orioles, and we need to tell the story about that game in another cast, because that's always...
I'm going to find you, Orioles fan.
So I will smite thee.
Your own a smiting.
Yeah. But,
damn it.
Like, yesterday, we're sitting in section 110, which is pretty close. It was right in between the Giants dugout, the visitor dugout, and in between visitor dugout and the bullpen.
Right.
And a few of the seats in front of us were, like, loose. Like, they were, like, coming apart.
Yep.
And not to mention the sound system, like, you can't hear anything, like, from down there. I don't know if it was like you in the second deck, but there was it's terrible. And my wife's like, what is going on? I'm like they're in the national anthem. It was like, you could hear her singing the national anthem, and it was like coming out of like three different, like it was like echoing three different ways if you could barely hear it.
Right.
So and of course, just staring at Mount Davis, the one thing I am happy about is I finally get to see Stu be up there.
Right.
Shout out to Dave Stewart.
Dave Stewart
finally got his number, which has already been retired, but they re-retired it because he wore it. So that was good to see. And of course, they actually did. Now, it's funny, interesting is they did a shout out to Vida Blue.
R.I.P. We lost this year.
They actually his son threw out the first pitch, and I'm wondering. I'm sitting there like, why isn't his number retired up there? So we'll kind of go into that as the organizational stuff. Mm-hmm. So why are we here? Why are we here? And why are the A's planning to move to Vegas?
Yes.
Okay, so there are three major culprits of why the A's are moving. First one being the city of Oakland itself. Not so much the fans, but just the city of Oakland. So I'll touch on that. You got the A's organization, like the ownership group and also their manager group. So we're talking about John Fisher, we got Lou Wolf, we got Billy Beane, and we got Cavill. And then MLB, the actual MLB, and the Players Association. All three of them have a part to play in this. Now, some can argue one's more than another, blah, 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 blah. Even in my head, I was going to give percentages on who gets this. But all three of them have a stake in this, which is why they are where they are.
Right.
So, first one, we'll start off with, like, the city of Oakland. So, we're going to touch on some Oakland history, some Oakland 101. If everyone doesn't know, like, Kiilz and I are from Oakland. We are 80s babies.
Yeah.
We actually both grew up, born and raised in Oakland, left Oakland as adults, and have lived back in Oakland as adults. Have come back.
Yes.
And then have left again.
Yep.
There are reasons why.
Yep.
So, for people who don't know the city of Oakland, or even that are from the Bay Area, don't even know the history of Oakland, so I'm going to give you some Oakland History 101. The city of Oakland, if you want to say what the city of Oakland was in the 60s, when all three of the sports franchises that Oakland had in going from the 60s and the 70s to include the NHL team, which we won't talk about because it's NHL. But if you want to think about it historically, if San Francisco was the white-collar capital of Northern California, which it was in the 60s, the blue-collar capital of Northern California was Oakland. If most people don't know this, but pretty much lined up with 880, was all the factories, the warehouses, all the blue-collar stuff that was Oakland's economic identity. And that was what made blue collar, if you think about it, like when they talk about the A's, the Raiders, and the Warriors of the 60s and 70s, they talk about blue collar, like the city. That was what the teams represented the city, especially the Raiders and the A's. But the reality is, at some point in the early 70s, the city, when all blue collar stuff went away across the United States, and everyone wanted to go white collar, well, that happened in Oakland too. So all those warehouses and factories closed down, shut down, and then some weird things happened with the city of Oakland. And one of them being that around that time was when the city was redlined. And redlining is, for most people who don't know this, redlining is a process where the city government decides kind of where certain groups of people are going to live in the regions of that city. Now, it can be based off of economy. It can be based off other reasons. We can talk about that. This is a sports thing. We're not going to go into a lot of the other things that are bad with redlining. But that's when Oakland, like the original districts, like if you ever hear people talk about the Montclair district or the Laurel district, that's what all that stuff. But all those districts was Oakland's original redlining. That's what they did. And it was by design. So for people that have been around the city of Oakland, there's a reason why all of the Latin community is in the Fruitvale district. That wasn't by chance. Not all of the Latin people in the 70s decided we're going to live in this one section of Oakland. That's not by chance. That was by design. Same thing with the Asian communities in right there by downtown, African American communities in East Oakland, and of course the Caucasian communities up in the hills. All right. So now what happened when then is, okay, so Oakland kind of lost its economic identity. So what do they do now? Okay, well, let's talk about some certain decisions. Okay, Keely and I are fortunate. We are from, so if you don't understand Oakland, Oakland is pretty much divided by its freeways. So you have 580, which is pretty much lined up with the hills, and you got 880, which is down what we call the flatlands. Okay, if you are from the 580 side, most of those areas are very nice. That's where the Montclair district is. That's what goes through Piedmont, which used to be its part of Oakland, but now it's its own city in the middle of Oakland. Strange. We can talk about that.
That's a whole nother. Yeah.
That's a whole other can of worms.
Yep.
But so if you're from 580, you pretty much, it's like those are nicer communities, nicer areas, but there's no real commercial there. In fact, it is against the law for trucks to actually drive over a certain way to drive on 580.
Facts.
Okay. So, go to 880. The 880 side, where all those factories, everything, all that area, pretty much through the 70s, 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, has pretty much become very run down, and it doesn't really look nice. But that's also where all the commercial stuff is. But unfortunately, like, as the city, as you and I, as Keely and I have grown up, what have we seen? Have we seen any, like, major push from the city government to actually revitalize those areas? Not really. We've seen like little tiny pushes. Like I remember in the early 2010s when they were talking about downtown Oakland beginning a little bit better, and they kind of tried to revitalize that.
Revitalize Jack London a little bit, and around that kind of area. And
but the thing is,
even then, like
it was kind of half-assed because, for instance, if you go to Jack London right now, if you don't park in any of the parking structures, what happens? Your car's getting broken into.
Sure is.
Straight up is.
Absolutely.
And then also, like, every time there's, like, a protest / riot, what do? They pretty much destroy downtown. So pretty much they go down Broadway and destroy.
Broadway and take your pick. Yeah,
okay.
It's rough.
So here's the issue. So the city of Oakland, like, has not really done enough to really keep the 880 area looking nice, or even trying to like be respectable, say compared to other up and growing cities. Yeah, so mind you, but where are the teams at? Oh yeah, they're off 880.
Right off 880.
Right off 880.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and all the commercial stuff is on 880. So if you're a professional organization, a franchise, you're gonna pretty much be staying on 880. So if the city is not doing a good job of keeping those areas nice and clean and looking nice, putting money into it, would you, Akili, if you're an owner of the A's, the Raiders, or the Warriors, these are billion-dollar franchises. These are billion-dollar businesses. Would you want to put a billion-dollar business and keep your billion-dollar business in Oakland?
Not really, no.
Okay, exactly.
Not really, no.
So,
no.
So and now let's talk more about where the city of Oakland is also.
I mean, especially if you're telling me like, oh, we have kind of that same spot right there. That's where the team is going to be. Like, oh, in the middle of that hood.
So here's the thing with the city of Oakland, and I get it. Like, part of the problem with the city is every mayor has their own take,
yes.
and and we actually know people that have grown up and actually have worked for the city of Oakland and been part of the city government. Shout out to Sarita. What the city government has not done is they have not been able to change the landscape of Oakland, especially on the 880 side of the house, to a positive where a billion-dollar franchise is going to want to stay there. And then when you look at when the A's, the Raiders, and the Warriors have moved, or are now planning to move. Think about this. When the Warriors decided that they were going to build Chase Center in there, how long did it take for them to get that arena built?
It felt pretty fast.
It was super fast.
It felt pretty fast.
What about the Raiders? When the Raiders finally decided they were going to move to Vegas, how fast did that happen?
Felt pretty fast.
And now the A's in the past 3 months have done essentially more in Vegas to prep for their moving there than they've been able to do in the past, like, 5 years in Oakland.
Felt like all that went pretty fast.
Why is that? Well, because there are roadblocks with the city. This goes into, once again, not the fans. I'm not gonna talk about the fans. Fans are great, but there are people in Oakland that whenever these stadium things are getting ready to be built, they sue the city.
Yes.
They do all these lawsuits. It's
Yes.
like people that actually live in Oakland.
Yes.
Are preventing these teams from staying here.
Yes.
And now let's talk about the grand thing in Oakland about how they portray the public money. Everyone wants to argue that with the Howard Terminal that some of that money was going to be public. Okay, well, I will speak kind of objectively. They should put money into it because what the A's are doing in Howard Terminal, if you actually see what they're going to do, is about a third of all the money that was going to be spent in that area was to revitalize the area.
Correct.
Why should the team that's literally saying we're going to help revitalize pretty much not only Howard Terminal but all of downtown Oakland, and then you all are like, nah, you got to flip the bill. We're not going to do any of the public money. Now, granted, I will say this for the city of Oakland. The main reason why the government, and they won't really say this out loud, but I'll say it for them, is they don't have the money for that, one. And two, should they be spending $130, $200, $150 million with the A's, or do they need to put that money into all the things that are wrong with the city of Oakland that we've been talking about? You know,
And I feel like that was basically like, there's a lot of people come down hard on Libby Shaft, but I feel like that was her main, her whole main thing was like, no, the city of Oakland has bigger problems than these sports teams, than these billionaires that want to build these cathedrals to themselves, and blah, blah, blah,
they
blah.
right, and they right. So, and they are absolutely right, and and unfortunately, that's where Oakland is. So, when it comes to the A's leaving, are the Raiders leaving or the Warriors leaving? The reality is that these are businessmen. These are business organizations. They're in the entertainment business. Yeah. They don't see that being in Oakland, it's going to they don't see the bang for their buck.
Correct.
Like, for instance, like the Warriors, they literally moved, after winning 3 titles, moved to San Francisco right across the bay, and after that 3rd title, the team was pretty much gutted because Klay Thompson was gone for 2 years. Kevin Durant, destroyed his Achilles, blew up on live television, and then he was gone. And Steph ended up breaking his arm in the beginning of the next season, and they were terrible that year. And attendance even went down, but they still made money,
right? Because
San Francisco is able to pull more money than Oakland.
And Chase Center is a really nice arena.
It's a very nice arena. And also now there's a caveat to that: the ownership of the Warriors actually own the Chase Center outright. Like, that's another thing. They own, like, pretty much, so they print money there, literally. Correct. But still, their franchise has almost doubled in worth because of that move. Yes. Look at the Raiders. You and I have talked about this. If professional sports is the entertainment business. Yes. And Las Vegas is like a entertainment hub. Yeah. And now they actually want to add sports teams. Right. Who wouldn't want to put their professional sports team that's an entertainment into the entertainment hub?
And thanks to the Golden, I know we weren't going to talk about NHL, but on that same spectrum, thanks to the Golden Knights, now Vegas is a winning. Very winning.
They went to
city.
How do you go to the Stanley Cup Finals your first year in existence and then win the title within? That's like
announce my presence with authority. That's like
when the Marlins, the Florida Marlins, after like they'd only been in the league for like a couple of years, they won the World Series. It's like, just like that shit. Right. And that's what's so crazy about, when people are like not understanding why the A's ownership wants to move. So when it comes to Oakland, City of Oakland's got to get right. They got to get right economically, like the way it is now, like the same thing that hasn't been working in the past 40 since we've grown up. Like, I will say this is like, once again, I was born and raised there. I left. I went and played Army for a few years. Then I came back and chose to live back in Oakland, and actually lived closer to the Montclair district but right there above the Fruitvale district. And I left again. And it's because, like, it's like this: the rich get richer in Oakland. The nice areas stay nice, and the not so nice areas stay not nice. In fact, are a lot worse. Yeah. Like, in my opinion, a lot of the 880 area is a lot worse now than when we were kids.
It seems like it.
So the city of Oakland's got to get right. And then once that happens, and also they need to figure out what their economic identity is, because with like I feel like the city of Oakland has not had
like if we're not blue collar anymore, what
are
we?
we?
Yeah.
What are we?
But I think we're trying to be tech.
Like if you look at like all the East Bay cities, like your Fremonts, your San Leandros, your Haywards, your Union Cities, all of them have gotten significantly better in our lifetime. Like literally, I remember we watched a video when they were talking about there was a guy who made a comment that the Fremont is just Oakland's parking lot, which that was entirely accurate 20 years ago.
Sure.
But Fremont ain't like that anymore. Why? Because all those cities have decided that their economic identity is to be a suburb of either Silicon Valley or a suburb of San Francisco.
Right.
And that's their economic identity. And that's what they do. Like when they market their housing, all the new housing, everything, they are all marketing, oh, come live here where you're only this far away
look at what I didn't mean to cut you off, but look at what the Niners did to Santa Clara.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like now all of a sudden Santa Clara, I mean, you know, for people that were just like, oh, what's in Santa Clara? Great America, that's about it. It's like, no, Niners, now all this, that brought all these other offices and business, and now Santa Clara is part of like a tech. In that tech silicon, like this is what we So
Oakland needs to figure out like what they want to be, and unfortunately, they just might need to accept that they need to be a suburb of San Francisco. And here's another thing about Oakland, and there's one of the reasons why myself, and Keely don't live in Oakland anymore is because it's become too expensive for people that are from there, that were born and raised in their late 70s, early 80s, to even move there. Like I know people that work for the city of Oakland that actually live in Sacramento, that commute from Sacramento like either every day or 3 or 4 times a week. That's how far it is. So people that actually work for the city, unless they've been living there since 80s, early 90s, they far away. So So Oakland's got to get right. So that's number one. And the people that live in Oakland, all you cats that are suing the city for all these things, you are not part of the solution. You may think you are, but you are definitely part of the problem. So people, we got to get right on that. Now we'll switch to the A's organization.
A's organization, which you are very well steeped in. One of the main reasons I think we became just friends in the first place was our love of baseball, our love of the A's, and I know that I was always impressed by your just how deep knowledge you go. So maybe you can speak to most people. If you just ask any fair weather baseball person, you ask, who do you think owns the A's? Most people would probably tell you Billy Beane, because that's just the name that's become synonymous with the Oakland A's ownership group, at least until about Moneyball came around. Some people would say, oh, you've heard of Charlie Finley. During those years, there was the Haas family. And now we have John Fisher. So maybe you could just speak a little bit about just the A's ownership, this organization group, Billy Beane, the new president Dave Kaval, and just how they've contributed or not contributed in helping the A's move to Vegas, or them staying, or just in general.
As Keely mentioned earlier, our love for the Oakland A's and baseball in general is pretty much because the 88, 89, and 90 teams.
The best run of teams of all time.
Yes,
we're gonna do a whole thing. Just you wait. That's not for this. That's for them. But we're just you wait. Just you wait.
So here's the issue with that. So when the Haas family owned the team.
Okay.
And most people are going to be shocked by this. At one time, the A's had the highest payroll of all of baseball.
What the heck you say?
All of baseball. In fact,
when Oakland A's?
When Jose Canseco signed his extension, but prior to the 1992 season, he was the highest paid player in baseball.
Jose Canseco?
Now, granted, Jose was traded that year, and then Barry Bonds signed pretty much doubled Jose's contract with the Giants a season later. But at one time, the Oakland A's had the highest payroll. So what happened there? Well, unfortunately, the head of the Haas family passed away in the mid-90s, and then the Haas family decided to sell it to a conglomerate group of just investors and everything. There wasn't really a head owner. And if people watch the movie Moneyball, or the book Moneyball, the scene where in the beginning where Billy Beane is talking to, saying, hey, I need more money, and the guy was like, we don't have any. That's actually true. Unfortunately, during the dark days in the 90s in Oakland, because there was no money, well, they couldn't really keep anybody. And also, the general manager at the time didn't really make good trades. Like when we traded Jose Canseco, that we didn't really get a good return on investment for that trade. When we traded Mark McGuire, we didn't get really good return on investment on that. And then a lot of the moves that we saw, like during the '90s,
people walked away free agency.
Yeah,
and just
like the only person that pretty much stayed in Oakland was, and that was because he wanted to stay in Oakland, was Ricky Henderson. And thank you, Ricky. We're going to talk a lot about you in a few months. But yeah, Ricky's an Oakland gem. The hard reality is that so Billy Beane, had to figure out how to put a winning team on the field, and he did. Using Moneyball, using some things he learned from his predecessor, because once again, he didn't draft Jason Giambi. It was his predecessor that drafted Jason Giambi, Eric Chavez, and Miguel Tejada. And also, I think Tim Hudson, and all the big three. But he figured out how to put decent players around the team without spending a lot of money, as the movie Moneyball and the book Moneyball goes into it. But there's negatives to that.
Yeah, I mean, just real quick for those who haven't seen the movie or might not. Quick example is there's a little quick scene in the movie where Brad Pitt as Billy Beane is talking about what are we trying to replace, and they're throwing him, we're trying to replace Chavez and this and that, and it's like, no, we're trying to replace the numbers that those players generated. So therefore, the thinking is if you're having Eric Chavez has a certain number for an on base percentage, and you can get 3 cats for the same money that you get one person that would generate same said on-base percentage, that makes sense. In a sense, that's Moneyball.
Okay. Well, what Moneyball doesn't really talk about is these couple things. One, so everyone talks about on-base percentage. It's really not... On-base percentage is the easy one to talk about because so pretty much it's hits plus your walks divided by your at-bats. That's your on-base percentage, right? And the dream is if you have a bunch of cats that have a... like 350 to 400 on base percentage, you're awesome. But the real stat that makes Moneyball is on base plus slugging percentage. And because slugging percentage is actually very difficult to explain, I am not going to go into it because it is a lot of different numbers mixed into one.
Right.
Essentially, what your slugging percentage is your tendency when you actually put contact on the ball, you get a hit. How good are you at making extra base hits?
Right.
So if you have a high on-base percentage, on-base plus slugging percentage, what that really means is you get on base a lot, but when you actually do put wood on the ball, you have a high percentage of home run, double, triple. Like you're not just going to hit a single.
Right.
But Billy Beane's system has a flaw. If you look at the very late 90s, early 2000s teams where we won, 90 to 100 games and we went to playoffs all the time, but we'd always get knocked out of the first round. Well, here's the issue with that. If you actually look at the game by game numbers, the majority of the wins that the A's did during that time frame was against the opposing team's 3rd through 5th starters. Do you ever face the 3rd through 5th starters in the playoffs?
Very unlikely.
Who do you face?
1 and 2s.
And our winning percentage against 1 and 2s is very bad during that era. Why is that? Because it's very hard to draw walks on stud pitchers. And when you're facing playoff teams, their 1s and 2s are usually all-star caliber pitchers. So one of the flaws with Billy Beane's system, and this is why if you read the book Moneyball, one of his comments is, my job is just to get them to the playoffs. The playoffs is a crapshoot. No, that's not entirely true. Like, if you look at the history of baseball, especially in the past 30 years, every World Series team has certain things. Like, they have 1 or 2 all-star / made damn near Hall of Fame caliber position players that pretty much anchor the entire lineup. They have 1 to 2 all-star pitchers, and their bullpen is fantastic.
Yeah. I think at one point you said every team needs at least every World Series team has at least 3 things from what you can look at: a MVP candidate, a Cy Young candidate, and if not a knockout bullpen, a closer that's
like close you down.
Yes, yeah.
And the problem with the A's is that time, especially after Giambi left. Unfortunately, the way baseball teams are designed, you have your A players, your B players, your C players, right? And what Billy Beane was doing, and he was actually very successful at doing it, was he literally would have an entire team of B players.
Yep.
Except for the pitching. He's always been great at picking pitching, which why this year their pitching is so terrible. I have my own theory on that. We'll touch on that later. But normally, Billy Beanes are good at pitching. But the problem is when it comes to the position players, you can't run into the playoffs with 9 Bs and expect to win. Like, it's just not going to happen. You got to have a couple A's in there. You got to. You have to. It has to happen.
Yeah, facts.
Or you have to have a really unique strategy on how to score runs. And when we talk about the 2014 team, we'll talk about that 2014 Kansas City Royals team.
Oh, boy.
Who figured that out.
Oh, boy.
So we'll talk about that. A few other things about Moneyball that, if you read the book, is he talks about that the problem with baseball is these players get overpaid. And that is entirely not true. In fact, as much as I hate Scott Boras, he actually did something and put through all the ownership under the bus when he talked about the second A-Rod $250 million contract. Whereas he actually made a spreadsheet where he proved that the Yankees, based on a lot of factors, made $100 million a year off of A-Rod, but they were only paying him $25. So essentially, he was only getting paid 25% of what he was worth. In any industry, that is insanity. But in baseball, they do it all the time. So let's be real about the fact. And also, Akili, when you go to a baseball game, do you go to see the players or do you go to see the manager, the GM, and the owner?
I mean, the players are the ones out there doing their thing for 9 innings.
Yeah, remember, so this is an entertainment product. So you have to pay your entertainers.
Yes.
So, now I understand why Billy Beane had to do that, because he had no money. Let's go to 2005. Okay, 2005, the A's get sold to a group which financially was pretty much led by John Fisher, but he didn't want to be the head guy. So pretty much Lou Wolf was the head dude.
For those who don't know who John Fisher is the current owner of not only the A's, but he owns the Gap. That's his big...
Well, he is the heir of the Gap. His
Gap,
family came up with the Gap.
Yes.
So he is essentially, if you want to say he is the biggest silver spoon-fed guy in the Bay Area right now. But once again, so he buys the team. But his ownership group, instead of taking Billy Beane and do what the Red Sox did, was, hey, we're going to use your method of picking players, but then we're also going to pay them.
Right.
And they decided, like, hey, we want you to keep doing what you're doing, but do it like at a level where you're really not paying them. So you have a cheap GM who did it by design, but then you have really cheap ownership group, and what do you get? You get everything since 2006 on, like 2005, 2006 on, which is our team is essentially the quadruple A's. We are the minor league system for everybody else's team. If you look at every World Series championship team in the past 15 years, there's at least an Oakland A on one of those team on the team.
And most times it's usually a nice anywhere from a 2 to 3 year window. Players on our team within the next 2-3 years, they will probably win a World Series somewhere.
Or they'll be an MVP. Like look at Josh Donaldson. He left the A's, and the next year he's the MVP. That's the thing about the A's ownership is that like. And this is what drives me absolutely crazy about the A's ownership is you're in the entertainment business and you want to be successful. Don't you want to be successful? Because here's the truth of the matter. If you spend more money on the players and the team is good, then more butts are in the seats and you make more money and then you get more national games, which, by the way, that's where the teams make their money is where baseball teams make their money is the TV stuff.
Yep.
Like
pay attention to anything you hear about teams and MLB networks and affiliates and who's getting contracts to games and all. A lot of money's being thrown around in exchange.
Like to be real, like everyone talks about like the A's, like current like the state where there's not many people going to it. The A's are still making money. Like the ownership group is still making money from their TV deals. Like so, there could be 0 butts in the seats and they would still make money. And this is my problem with the A's ownership is if you're in there just to make a couple of dollars and that's it, get on out. Because here's the thing is like you should be competitive. You should want the team to win. When teams are successful, you make more money. Look at what the Warriors did. They went from one of the worst franchises ever in the history of the NBA, the history of all sports. And then that ownership was like, we're going to spend money and we're going to spend as much as we can to win. And then they go to the championships 5 years in a row, win 3 of them. Should have won. The 73-9 team should have won. They almost quadrupled their worth in 5 years' time. Like, that's insane. But it's because why? They were winning. Like, look, this is the thing. There was a stat recently I saw on ESPN that every other Warrior game was a nationally televised game. Do you understand how much money they're making just off of that? Like, how many times has ESPN showed the A's in the past, like, 15 years?
The reverse boycott game.
Yes.
That was the last
Yes.
time.
But
I've seen the A's on ESPN.
But, like, remember that, like, you and I remember, because we saw a lot of the 2014 team games, especially when they got hot.
Yes.
How many more national games did they were on that all the time? That team made a lot of money.
Yes.
Now let's also talk about the greed. Okay, for those that don't know, if you're a team where you're considered like the bottom, like if you're the bottom feeding team, like where you're supposedly don't make a lot of money. Now, mind
A's, your Rays, A's and Rays are the main ones that stick out.
Now, mind you, they actually brought up a stat recently that John Fisher is probably the third richest person out of all the owners in baseball. So here we are, we got the third richest owner in all of baseball. Yet we're the bottom feeding team.
Yep.
So about 4 or 5 years ago, when MLB decided to come up with this whole revenue sharing, where teams that spend hella money, like the Red Sox and Yankees, those teams, some of their money they would actually get taxed, and some of their money was actually given to these lowballing teams. And the entire point of that money was they were supposed to give that money to sign players.
Right, with the thinking of, hey, I can't compete with these teams' payrolls. How am I supposed to get better? Here, take some of their money. Make your team a little better.
And guess what the A's did with that? That ownership group pocketed it.
They made their lives a little better.
They made their lives a little better. And when MLB finally threw them under the bus, all they did was just say, "Oh, you're not getting it anymore." That's where we'll come a little later talking about the MLB.
Right.
It's like, come on, man, you're getting extra money.
And it wasn't right away. It was like, the next couple years.
Yeah.
But that's going to be shaved down, and then you'll get nothing.
And also, like, this whole idea that Billy Beane kind of comes off like where he knows how to spend money right. It's like, no, not really at all.
No.
Like, he's spent money, he just has put it on, like, terrible players, but this is why. He's had to overpay people to come to Oakland because guess what? Nobody wants to come to Oakland.
There's a gentleman named Matt Holliday who made lots of headlines a few years ago because he was shopping around for teams, and you can go ahead and put teams in your no trade clause. Matt Holliday said, yeah, I'll play for any team except one.
Go back to Oakland. So nobody wants to actually play in Oakland. So, And
why would they? They've created this narrative like, well, especially young players, they want to get paid. Old veteran players kind of going out, they kind of want to get paid a little bit, especially if they think they still have some value and some worth. And the A's ownership group has created this narrative of, well, you're not going to get paid.
Well, and another thing is that, like, what a lot of teams that have low payrolls do is instead of like paying players heavy when they come to their free agency, they'll sign them into long-term deals when they're still in their rookie deal. Like Evan Longoria, I remember Evan Longoria, he was the rookie of the year, and they signed him to a 10-year extension that offseason.
Yep.
Now, to be fair, he was only good about 4 or 5 of those years, and they traded him and they got some value back, and now I think he just came off the last year. But you kept him relatively cheap. Like, that's the way to keep players cheap. No, what does Billy do? He has them go through their entire rookie deal, and then they leave. Or he trades them when they're almost out of their rookie deal, like it just did with Chappie and Olsen, and look at how well they're doing. Is it
usually like to avoid arbitration or
no? So you get the most value. So players that have team control left are more valuable than players that don't. For instance, on the Olsen deal, they got 4 or 5 players back from the Braves because Olsen had like 2 or 3 more years left of arbitration.
Okay.
If he would have traded him like the year before they're going to free agency, unless that player signs a player like with that team, like I think Donaldson did. No, Donaldson actually had like 3 years left of team control. That was terrible. We'll have to do a show just on Josh Donaldson.
Well, that'll be part of the 2014.
Yeah,
that'll be part of 2014. That was a big part of that year.
But that's how you get more players back on the trade, is if they have a lot of team control left, which is why I say, again, if you sign a player young in their career to a deal that's way past the arbitration years, their value is higher. Like, actually, if you want to talk about Hall for a player that wasn't even really that great, sorry, Nick, I'm going to have to throw you under the bus, but Nick Swisher, like, after his second year on the team, like, he signed, like, a 5-year extension that would have taken him 2 years past his arbitration years.
I remember. Yeah.
And he was easy to trade, and we actually got decent value back for him because of that. But Billy Beane doesn't really do that for a lot of guys, which is strange. So for the A's, and for the A's ownership, even if you go to Vegas, if you don't put a winning team on there, like, what's the point?
Right. I mean, that's kind of the pushback that some of the Nevada kind of lawmakers and some of them are saying, like, wait, you want to move the Oakland A's here? What, the worst team in baseball?
And their ownership
that team that's been just this bad example of baseball this whole time. We don't want that shit. So,
we don't want that shit. And trust me, like, in Keely and I know this, like, whenever there's a new stadium, there's that new hotness, that new car smell, if you want to call it.
Sure.
So there's gonna be a lot of players, and like they're probably gonna be successful within their first couple of years of being there. But this ownership, if they keep doing this the way they do right now, and they keep running the same circle of doom that they do, that's gonna be overdone within like 5, 6, 7 years.
Especially in Vegas. It'll be another Vegas show that no one wants to go see.
But let's talk about one of the points against the Oakland A's is this idea of sell. Like, the summer sell is great. Like, I did the chant yesterday in the 5th inning.
Yep. It's a great story.
It's a great story.
It's a great story.
But let's talk about the reality.
Let's talk about the truth of the story, though.
If the A's get sold this year, we're essentially starting from scratch. Everything has to be started from scratch. So this ownership group would have to be willing to understand that they are going to be taking heavy financial losses within the next 5 years. There probably will not be a new stadium within 5 to 10 years in Oakland, and the entire process, the entire Howard Terminal process, would be start over from scratch, which means everything that Cavill was just tired of dealing with, and Wish Fisher was tired of dealing with, and MLB was tired of dealing with. Guess what? We are about to hit the restart button on that.
Yep.
And people are like, "Oh, they could just stay in the Coliseum." No, the Coliseum right now is terrible.
It's not. You have to go there.
Yes.
Like it's not just a matter of, like, you see the stories that make national headlines, right? Oh,
the possum.
There's possums in the oh, there's feral cats, and oh,
sludge.
Those are major things. It's falling apart from just a minor step, like general cleanup.
Like, for instance, the first level seats, the expensive seats, are falling apart.
The ones that you still, even if they're empty, will still tell you can't sit there. They will still just, nope, you don't have a ticket. Like, your whole row's empty, my guy. But
so any ownership group that's going to buy the A's, if this summer sell, they have to be an ownership group that has to understand they're going to take heavy losses up front. Like, to be honest, like, the only ownership group that I think that can do it is the Warriors owners, because that's what they did. And they knew that they were going to take losses. They knew when they bought the Warriors that they were going to, especially when they traded Monte, like, they knew that they were going to take losses. They knew that. But then look what happened. They spent the money when they needed to, and now look at them. Now they're just printing money.
And another thing is, I think it would help immensely for an ownership group that actually genuinely cares about the city of Oakland, because you're gonna have to work with the city, and you're gonna have to make some improvements, even if you start over. And because, I mean, that's just kind of the thing. Fisher and them, they just don't care about the city of Oakland in general. The Warriors ownership group, at least, I think, would have cared about Bay Area enough to maybe kind of go, okay, like, we understand, we understand how important it is to the Bay Area for this to hang around. That's.
But then again, though, that same ownership group did what with the Warriors? They moved them across the bay.
Sure.
Because it was the best business decision.
Absolutely.
That's the problem. Once again, this is where my Group 1 meets with Group 2. Mm-hmm. Like, any team that's in Oakland will not be successful unless the city turns its head around. So any ownership group that wants to buy the A's in the summer sell has to actually be part of Oakland politics. Like, literally,
I think that's what I was trying to get at.
And that's the big point is that, like, because I'm telling you something, like,
because every other organization and group, they're gonna sure they buy the team, and it might not be Vegas, but it probably won't be Oakland. They're gonna find somewhere else to go. That's I get it. So The question a lot of people have to ask themselves, like, yeah, sell, but to whom? And what are they going to do with it? I'm all for not having John Fisher and them own the A's, but we should find an ownership group that's going to actually care and actually do something for the city as well. But
also force the kind of, not really force the city, but really get the city to understand. It's like, if you want us to be here, then you got to do your part. Nothing's changed in the past like 30, 40 years on how the city of Oakland's run. And last time I checked, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result.
Yep.
And that's what the city of Oakland's been doing for the past, ever since I've been alive. Sure. So I just turned 40, so you're talking 4 decades. Yeah, if you want to know what it's like to be from the city of Oakland in the 80s, and I can show you pictures of what used to be the Kmart by the Fruitvale Bridge going into Alameda, and now you see that lovely homeless town that's there near the Fruitvale and High Street Bridge. That is that is the story of the city of Oakland for the past 40 years.
Let's touch a little bit on the kind of third thing that you were talking about, the MLBPA, the Major League Baseball Players Association. You want to touch a little bit about what their kind of hand in this whole Oakland A's thing.
All right, so where MLB has really, really done a terrible job of is making sure that the product that they have on the field is good for everybody. All right, so one of the things that the NBA just did in their last CBA was the teams have to spend a certain amount of the cap every year, or they get penalized. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to do what this is where the NFL is really successful. If all of the teams are active and trying to spend as much money as they can, you have a more level playing field.
Yes.
I used to watch A's baseball games from start to finish the entire season, to include watching their AAA teams and their AA teams. I would literally, like, my friends on Saturdays and Sundays would give me a hard time because instead of going to do something during the day, I would stay at home and watch the matinee games. But this year, the only game that I watched from start to finish was yesterday's game because I was at the game. Because right now, the A's are terrible, and I don't want to watch a terrible team. I don't want to give my time to that terrible team. Now, mind you, over half the league is terrible. For the Players Association, so first of all, the people that run MLB, they made a bunch of rules this year to increase this the pace of play, which I completely agree with. I'm happy that they made the shift rules.
Yep.
Almost every rule I kind of agreed. In fact, it shocked me. I'm like, when I'm thinking about turning on an A's game after I put my son to sleep, it's like 8 o'clock at night. I'm like, oh, let me see. They should be in the 3rd or 4th inning. No, it's the 6th or 7th already. And I'm like, oh shit, I've already missed the whole game. So if for the MLB and the MLS Players Association, they should be actively making sure that their owners actually spend money on the product, i.e., pay the entertainers. Okay, because let me tell you something. I heard a stat the other day that made my soul hurt.
Tell me.
Like, literally, it actually felt like a kick to the groin.
Oh, no.
The league average for payroll this year is $140 million.
Is that true?
140. The league average. That's the league average.
Yeah.
Guess how much the A's have spent this year?
Oh, boy.
I think it's $35 million. So you're telling me that the A's they literally are not paying, they're not even like within like spitting distance, not even spitting distance, they're not even within like throwing, they're not even shooting a sniper rifle's distance away from the league average.
$140 million.
League average. Could you imagine?
35.
Okay, so can you imagine if the A's spent $100 million this year? That means they would have spent $60 more million. That's 1.5 more times the amount that they've currently spent. Could you imagine the type of quality players? Like right now, the problem with the A's have a lot of good position players, good up-and-coming guys, but the pitching is awful. You can tell me they couldn't spend like $60 million on some pitchers? And also, and here's the other thing, the cheapest thing to buy in baseball is relief pitching. And now that they have up to 26 players, look at what the Giants are doing. They only have like 2 real starters. The rest of the games, they're like having like 3 or 4 guys pitch 2 to 3 innings. Like a lot of teams are doing that now because relief pitchers are cheap.
Yeah.
And relief pitchers are good.
Hell, a lot of they're doing the whole that opening starter business where relievers coming out first inning now.
Yeah. So guess what? Like, how far away from me, because relief pitchers are cheap, how far away from me where literally there's not a lot of starters? There's just big ass bullpens. Because realistically, this 26 player thing, it's like you can get away with, especially now with the DH being on both leagues, you could get away with only like 10 or 11, not really 10, but like 11 or 12 position players. That's 14 pitchers. That's 14 guys.
And not to mention, you could roll out a position player to pitch if you want.
Yeah, well,
if he's halfway decent.
He's halfway decent. If he plays third or shortstop, he actually has the cannon to do it.
Yeah.
So anyway, the product right now is bad because there's nothing to force the owners to actually pay the players. And that's what I think the ownership and the MLB itself and the Players Association need to get, is if every team was held to a certain standard of how much money they spend, we would have a better product for all of baseball, not just the A's. Because I guarantee you, as much as Billy Beane wanted to be cheap and be doing his Moneyball shit, if he was told, oh, you have to spend this much money, guess what? He would have been forced to actually keep players like Miguel Tejada. Probably would have been able to keep Giambi because Giambi was going to go to New York regardless. But, like, let's just talk about the 12, 13, 14 team. He probably would have figured out how to keep Cespedes, Josh Donaldson, Brandon Moss, like all those guys. When we had like 8 guys at the All-Star game that year, and we traded away 5 of them in the offseason, about that. Now, there's a caveat to that. And I will say this because there's a positive and negative. What that will also drive up is the player's salary, because what will end up happening is you'll have ownerships that are silly, and it will put 60% of their money into one player.
Yes,
and that's not good. So there has to be some check and balances. I am not a fan of the cap. They should never bring back a cap ever again. I love baseball without a cap. But there should be a limit of how many years. And there should be kind of like how the NBA does, that there's a threshold of certain percentages of that. But my real point to this is the Players Association and MLB itself, it looks bad when the summer of sell is a national level thing. And then also the current commissioner making comments that he makes, which is pretty much just shitting on Oakland. Now, he kind of has a point, because he has said for the past decade, it shouldn't take, the A's ownership, the Lou Wolf, the John Fisher ownership group, wanted to make a new stadium in 2005. It is 2023. It should not take damn near 20 years to get a new stadium. Once again, back to the city of Oakland, that's partially on you. But the reality is that he has a point. It's like, come on, but on the flip side, it's like, what are you doing to make sure that happens? If the A's, especially when it comes to butts in the seats, I'm sorry, you remember those early 2000s? I remember when Mount Davis was full. When they filled Mount Davis, not just for playoff games, for regular games, because the team was actually good.
You had marketable players that people wanted to come see. You had exciting things. You had excitement.
For instance, the one thing that was shown in Moneyball with the win streak.
Yes.
And when Hattie hit that walk off, that year Mount Davis wasn't full just for that streak. It was full for the majority of the season because the team was good. Same thing with the 12, 13, 14 teams. That team was good. So the reality is if the team is good and you have more butts in the seats, you look better for national level. So where the Players Association and MLB are terrible about this is they allow teams like the A's and the ownership group to run amok and not actually be doing what's best for the sport and what's best for the business.
Right.
Which is putting a good product on the field.
Right.
Okay? And every team should do this. And every team should be held to that standard.
I remember one point they were trying to compare the A's and the Rays. Were like, oh, the Rays have a similar problem. No, the Rays figured out their problem.
Yes. They have been, if you think about the Rays, do you understand how hard it is for the Rays, for them to be competitive with a low payroll, terrible stadium, and having to face the Red Sox and the Yankees half of their season?
I don't know if anybody I need someone to go and take a look at the American League East standings at one point, and you see just how crazy the American League East is right now. It's pretty nuts.
And it's pretty nuts. And the thing about it is that if baseball I would love for them if all teams were spent like almost the same amount of money. Granted, would we ever have any 100-win teams anymore? Probably not. Like, you literally have division winners like barely over 500 because the teams would be so equal across the board. But it'd be competitive. Every game would be worth the watch. Especially now, and Kiilz and I are from that era where we could never watch National League games because pitchers hit. And now that pitchers don't hit anymore, and now like it's actually tolerable to watch National League games. I mean, I get you, for all you National Leaguers that are all about
the old heads.
For the old heads, yeah. Sorry, it sucks to be.
Look, your favorite pitcher that you love on this planet, you won't watch him hit.
You won't exactly.
Never.
Never. But that's where the MLB and the Players Association kind of get involved with this because they should have nipped this in the bud like 10 years ago. This is where like MLB, they need to be more like, hey, owners, like come on, entertain the business.
Yeah.
Because remember, there was a time when baseball was the national pastime. Like, baseball was bigger than NFL and the NBA.
Yes.
Probably bigger than all three of them combined.
Yes.
Now, MLB is like, Like, let me this way. I listen a lot to, like, Conor Cowher, like, a lot of those Fox Sports guys.
Okay.
And guess what they never talk about? Baseball.
Right.
And this from the Bud C League to now, you went from being the top dog of all the professional sports to now close to, like, NHL level. So that's how to tell you, like, MLB, y'all gotta get your heads right.
Yeah.
So in conclusion, like, these are the three big things that about the A's going to Vegas. So, like, you know, the city of Oakland's got to get right. The A's ownership, they got to get right. If, say, this deal with the Vegas goes, right?
Yes.
And now remember, for those of you that don't know, the A's technically are under lease to stay in Oakland for at least one more season.
Correct.
But it takes 2 to 3 years for a stadium to get built. So
they're right now, even if everything went well, and if they voted on it's all good, they're projecting opening season in new stadium in Vegas 2028.
Yes.
So
2027 if the gods smile upon everybody.
Correct.
So what if Fisher decided, you know what, we're going to go to Vegas, but I want to go out with a bang, give the city of Oakland, you know what, we had some great What if he decided, you know what, next year?
Which is kind of your hope, right?
Yeah.
You kind of like, well, can we have a farewell season or something? Because
like,
I'm dreading what's going to happen
Well,
next
like, for instance, like, so I do think that, like,
you thought this team was bad.
Like, you know, we need, like, if the stadium right now needs a little bit of love, but I do think the only thing the stadium really needs to be refurbished for the next, like, couple of years is definitely the seats and the sound system. That was awful yesterday. And maybe deal with the sewage problem.
Fix your bathrooms, bro.
Yeah.
Fix your bathrooms.
But if they actually spent the league average on the team and let's set Billy Beane and go, I want this team to actually be competitive, go get it.
Yeah.
I'm curious to see what they would actually do. So in the third part is like the MLB, it's like, come on guys, like they're starting on the right trend. Granted, Manfred has said some stupid stuff about the A's, but there's some history for that. Like,
and I also think he sees a finish line with this. He just wants this thing to be done. Like, he's tired of talking about it. So he sees Vegas like, did you find a place? Good. Finally, good. Can we stop talking about good? All right. He sees a finish line of being able to stop talking about it. So.
Now, I will say this. So this is the next one, and this is probably a cause for conversation I leave the audience with this. I am still a Raider fan, even though the Raiders have moved to Vegas. I became a Raider fan when they moved back, and the main reason why I became a Raider fan was because even though I was a Niner fan before, I was not a fan of what the Niners did to Joe Montana and Jerry Rice. I am still going to be an A's fan if they move to Vegas. Because in my heart, I can never see myself leaving and becoming a Giants fan. I am personally invested in this.
So I guess in conclusion, the best thing we can hope as A's fans, and we'll be honest, it's a stretch, is that if this sell thing does come through, whoever buys the team next, like Drew was saying, has to have investment in the city of Oakland, or else it's the next owner's just going to look for a better city a better place to go.
Other than to sell the team within a couple of years.
Yeah, I think that's the best we can hope for, and we can keep going out there and wearing the sell shirts, because if for anything, it keeps the A's kind of relevant when they shouldn't be. That's what's kind of great about this summer of sell. No one should be talking about the A's, but people are talking about the A's. And so every time they do little wins and this like that, it's almost like, well, hey, look what could happen if people cared enough. And the fans obviously care.
All three of these components, if we ever want to see a successful team in Oakland, whether it be an A's or another team, all three got to get right about a lot of things. I will say that, like, it was great, as we saw yesterday, to see the stands what we grew up seeing. But here's the thing. I will say this to A's fans that are the current A's fans.
Yes.
Like, still be fans. Like I said,
Yes.
there's actually still good players on the team. If you actually look at the guys that are coming, we have a lot of good position players. Lawrence Butler, he's good. We've got a couple.
I like Tyler Soderstrom.
Yeah.
I like Brent Rooker. I like Esteury Ruiz.
I like Doda.
I like Ryan. Ryan Noda's growing on me. Ryan Noda's growing on me a lot. So there's good.
There's good play.
There's some good decent baseball to watch.
And I will say this: under the general management, under Billy Beane, and they've been able to turn around teams to get good pitching. Whereas right now, the biggest problem with the A's right now is not run production; it's pitching.
Absolutely.
And they could turn that around. Billy Beane's turned that around before. So, like, I'm hoping that if the A's do go to Vegas, I'm hoping the last couple of years is still they can put a good team on the floor. And if they could win, what if they won a title before going to Vegas? I guarantee you that would change the narrative, this whole negative narrative that we're having right now, is if they actually were to actually win in Oakland before they went to Vegas. I feel like the best thing going forward is if, like I said, if Summer Cell is successful, the next ownership group, like Kiilz said, needs to understand that it's not just they're not just running a business. It's a politics thing.
Yeah.
City of Oakland's got to, they got to figure that shit out. And then the ownership, like I said, the MLB Player Association, they need to get involved. And because I feel like, it's my thing as a baseball fan, I would love to be able to turn on the TV and be like, oh, there's a Rockies Diamondbacks game. I want to watch this. And right now I'm like, that's cute. But I would love it for baseball to be, like, competitive across the board, and that's on them.
We're waiting on the next big thing is going to be the big vote for the owners, and they need 75%. So, till then, A's fans, hang in there. We love y'all, and, we still love this team. We're hanging in strong. I'd say this was a good first little talk there, Dan.
Yeah.
All right, on. Well, that's pretty much it, y'all. We'll catch you on the next one. Don't know what we're going to talk about yet, but we'll definitely have
88.
We'll talk about 88. Boom, there we go. We're going to talk about 88. Well, that's it from Kiilz Corner for Drew and Kiilz. Thanks for checking in, and we'll catch y'all on the next one. Go A's!